Hey everyone, and welcome back to PDA Dad UK. Before we go on any further, can you go hit like, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and you will always know when new content's coming up and new information. Today, I'm really privileged to be joined by a guest, Ildi McIndoe. Hi, Ildi. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Fantastic. Ildi has many experiences with the world of SEND, special educational needs and disability. She has neurodivergent kids, but she also has a Down syndrome child. And we're going to be talking today about the Down syndrome bill. So, Ildi, before we go on, I mean, how did you get involved in this whole arena to start with?
I've always been into, I have a daughter who's 30 years old. There's two of them. They were twins. And once my daughter was born, I needed to find out more about Down syndrome, obviously, because it was something new to me. And things don't happen until you actually investigate them. So I wanted the best for my daughter, rang up various groups. Some were better than others, but some of the things I did not want, definitely, is that I didn't want my daughter to be institutionalized. I didn't want her to go to any special schools. I didn't want her to be held back in any way, disregarded, or not given the full potential that she had. And that's how I started.
Makes so much sense. And I think so many people relate to that, and that basis that I think we often, I liken these worlds to sort of Hogwarts and Harry Potter. It's a world that exists that you don't, until you're exposed to it or sort of thrust into it, you've got no idea it's out there.
No.
And then you find this magical kingdom, if you like, of support, but also, a lot of information that's out there that just doesn't get out there.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is the case. And I wanted people to learn from me as well. And I wanted to pass on that information. And I did have lots of very useful physiotherapists who came and gave me all these exercises to do for my daughter, because one of the things with Down syndrome is that they have poor muscle tone and right from birth, and that prevents them from developing as fast as an average baby, child, etc., of the same age. However, there are some very, very simple exercises that you can do. And fortunately for me, my mum came over from Australia for 6 months when I was expecting the twins, because we knew we were expecting the twins a while back, and she came over to help me. And being Hungarian, she used to exercise my sister, she used to exercise me, and she still brought over, and this is ridiculous, I know, but she still brought over the book, which is 30 years, no, not 30 years, how old was it? It must be nearly 40 years old, that she used for my exercises when I, like all brown paper and little diagrams of babies and what they ought to do. And I had done the same with my other two children, like the elder two children that I've got, because why not? It worked. It does not going to do them any harm. And so I just carried on.
Good on the Aussies. Always got to love a good Aussie. But I love that sense that, again, that sort of support comes in. What's it been like? I mean, for you, raising a child who is neurodivergent, who obviously has Down syndrome and the disabilities that accompany that quite often. What's life been like for you guys?
Generally, you learn very quickly that you have to go your own way. If you want to go your own way, that you are not going to be popular. And therefore you start to develop a really thick skin. And I think that's for anybody with any type of disability. That's not me specific, that's just anybody. And if you don't want to join what I always call the conveyor belt of what you're supposed to do within the information that's given to you from various different bodies like social services, education, health, etc., then you have to create your own path. And that's a path that is for any individual. However, that presents its own problems, because sometimes there are people who also have a young child with, there are people who have got children with Down syndrome and so on and so forth. And your child is developing faster, mainly because of the fact that she is a twin. And therefore we have a direct comparison as to what can be done and what can't be done. But more importantly, they're not being pushed. And I don't know how many times I've sort of heard the words, oh, they're just not ready. But that isn't something. Our children would never be ready if you didn't help them to be ready. Yep. And I have been accused of being a pushy mum, but I don't care, because I I have the results, and that's all that matters. And I would have done the same for all my other children. I have done the same for my other children. You know, I don't think my daughter particularly liked going, my eldest daughter liked going swimming all the time, but eventually she got used to it, and now she's an excellent swimmer, etc., etc. I mean, things like that. You know, you have to sort of see if there is, because children need to be part of the rest. You know, they need to learn how to be part of society at any age, regardless of what their abilities and disabilities are. And that's why I was thrilled when we used to have the Inclusion Act, if you like, or the inclusion politics or policies that went through, because my daughter gave far more, I think, to a lot of people than ever she took away. So that's how we got into it. And, you know, there are lots of incidents which I really, you know, I don't want to bore you with them, that meant that people would turn around and say, oh, well, that's just your, you know, child, and, you know, all this sort of, that's just, you know, etc. And I think, well, it's up to you what you decide to do, but don't criticize me that I'm going a different path, because that's what I feel is best.
Well, I've often likened, I mean, obviously my experiences within the SEND and the autism arena, and I've said it all the way through, is that sadly the system that we have in place is a squeaky wheel system. Unless you're pushing, unless you're making the noise, you're not going to get the grease. It just doesn't happen. No. Everybody I know who's successfully got through and got their diagnoses and got support, it's because they've had to fight every step of the way and be that loud, annoying voice in the constant, you know, always on the phone and always emailing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, you know, I could have given up at lots of different hurdles. I mean, there are loads of different times, if you like, when I could have just turned around and said, nah, you know, and I could have said, she's just not ready, you know, or, you know, but I knew she was. In my heart of hearts, I knew she was. And there are there are so many little instances that made me even more determined to ensure that basically that any positive route through is the best for her. So that's sort of the background. And my daughter went through mainstream nursery, mainstream infant, junior, high, and also carried on to college. She came away from high school with a GCSE in IT and drama, and she was halfway through getting a diploma for business studies. And she's still an avid reader. She's still really good. The only thing, much like me, is maths, and I hate maths, and she hates maths. So that's okay. That's how that started. And then throughout that period, I mean, I've accidentally been instrumental in reading the white paper for the special educational needs educational program that came in, I think, in 1995. The paper that came, the green paper and the white paper, which I'm sure that I started to read that in about 1992, and it took 5 or 6 years before it actually came through, which set down how how schools should be approaching education, and all part of that inclusion. And it was at a time when consultations, which we thought were brilliant when they first came out, were a great thing, because you thought, oh yeah, we're going to strive ahead with education. But unfortunately, like a lot of things, we then realised that the questions that we were asked were leading you to an answer that you had to answer, and didn't actually achieve what they should have achieved, and certainly not the continuum of it. So I also started a parent forum with the Education Authority in Staffordshire's funding and support, going around to different parents, not just parents of children with Down syndrome, but any child who has a special educational need. And that really opened my eyes to the diversity that we have. And if I'm a pushy mum, I've met others who are far, far pushier than me. I mean, I'm like a pussycat, really, in comparison to some of and rightly so. And they should have done that. You know, they should have pushed.
Yeah.
But the strain and the hostility that they face, I mean, the determination, etc., it's not fair. I mean, and I'm talking about severely disabled young children, where it's just not fair what hoops local authorities make people jump through. Social services are stretched, and when people go into social services, because they are doing what the sort of thing that I want. That's their heart. Their heart wants to go into helping other people. Sadly, once they've qualified, the system takes over. And when I used to be running the Parent Forum group, I used to have social workers come on the phone to me and tell me issues with various young people, children, who they knew weren't being looked after the way that they should have been, and told me about them, so that I would then contact the education authority to get the provision that they needed, because they knew that they wouldn't get it within the social service system, but the minute that they started to turn around and say, I need this for so and so, we haven't got the money. That was always, that hasn't changed in 30 years. So never, or probably longer than that actually, but for at least 30 years. And so they used to tell me about various clients that they had who hadn't been treated as best as they could, hadn't got the best, no matter how much their parents fought for it. And thankfully, I had enough kudos at the time to enable things like that to happen. And the most tragic one that I had, which really did, a very severely disabled young man, a fantastic family. And we fought and fought and fought, and we got what we needed, and then he died. And that really struck home to me. So any query that I had inside my head, or any reserves that I had about the fact that what you're doing is you're just being a pain in the arse and all the rest of it, went out the window. And I don't care. It got to the point where I've just said to you earlier, volunteering means that you can do what you want to do to a degree. And if you tell enough people that you will get what you need from them. The system is the same wherever you are. In fact, Staffordshire was actually a lot further ahead than Devon, because when I applied for support from social services, we were under the children's section at that time, the assessment that they did said that yes, Sarah Jane my daughter did need provision and help and support and a care and support package, etc., but they hadn't got any money. So I went back to them and said, well, that's not my problem, because unfortunately you've given me an assessment, you've identified the need, and therefore you have to provide that provision. And I think
people don't realise they have that power. I come across this so much with the people I interact with. People don't realise they're right. So that really brings us neatly into, what the whole point of doing this particular episode was, which is about the Down syndrome bill. Now, what's your involvement with that?
I noticed I had I think I saw on the Facebook page for Down syndrome, various different Down syndrome associations, actually. One of which is Positive About Downs. Another one is the Down Syndrome Association itself, and a variety of different other ones, because I needed to find out some information for myself. And also it's good if you go onto Facebook pages where you can share different things with various different people. And on one of those Facebook pages, I found out about the Down syndrome bill. And I thought, and then it did come into the public domain as well. And so obviously, as a person who has an interest in that, I'm following it really closely. And there are two sides, there's a debate about, what it actually, but for me, anything, I'm sure that you'll agree with the 2009 Autistic Act, that anything that ring fences provision for our children in a specific way can only be good. This all came about from an organisation called the National Down Syndrome Policy Group, who had been trying to involve and set up a all-party parliamentary group, which involves MPs from lots of different parties. They can come from, this particular one for the Down syndrome group has members from the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, Lib Dems, Scottish National Party, Democratic Unionist Party, Plaid Cymru, which might not pronounce that properly, so I apologise now for any Welsh listeners, and the Social Democratic and Labour Party, which is a separate party to just the Labour Party. So, this is across all parties, and there are thousands of all-party APPGs, they're called, thousands. And this one is specifically on Down syndrome. And they put together a bill. The provision that the bill is setting out is to make provision about meeting the needs of persons with Down syndrome, to place a duty on local authorities to assess the likely social care needs of persons with Down syndrome and plan provision accordingly and for connected purposes. Now, I really like the bit that it says at the end, which is for connected purposes, because that basically encompasses everything.
Yeah.
The schedule of the meeting, as in who is supposed to, relevant authorities and relevant functions, is incorporating all authorities. So the National Health Service, a Special Health Authority, a National Health Service Trust, an NHS Foundation Trust. With regard to social care, it includes a county council, a district council, a London Borough Council, the Common Council, etc., etc. So they're not missing out anybody. I mean, even housing, which is something that unfortunately does get bitten, is very, very important to make sure that, again, they've gone through district councils and also education and youth offending. So they specified that the governing body of a school in England, any governing body of a school in England, all of them will fall under this bill.
It's blanket, basically.
Yeah, you can't escape from it. You can't turn around as local authorities, I don't know, or you can't, but it doesn't apply to me, etc., etc. You can't do any of those. And on top of that, they've also, because of the fact that it's within the NHS, one of the things that they were particularly keen on is to make sure that the provision takes into account health, maternity, which is, I mean, health, if you like to start right from the very beginning when the baby's born. When my daughter was born, I was told that she had Down syndrome, which was a huge shock. And obviously it's difficult to come to terms with that not long after you've had a baby. Yeah. But as the time went on, it was all this negativity. There was no further support, as in, it's almost as if they're frightened of receiving, a summons as to, you give me the wrong information, and that's why they don't say anything. So it's really important that you start right from literally the get-go. And I was really lucky that I had a fabulous physiotherapist who used to come out and see my daughter. I also had a very oldie-worldy Hungarian mother who insisted on doing all the exercises with my daughter as well. And so right from the start, we're already reams ahead of some parents who have had a child with Down syndrome. And that makes a huge difference. Now, I have, when I used to work at the Down Syndrome Association, and I did give a presentation to various new parents, and they were fascinated with some of the crazy things that I did with my daughter. For example, when her sister, because she's a twin, when her sister was sitting up, then I used to plonk her in the corner of a settee to make sure that she had that. We didn't have all the fancy, gadgets that you now have with the thing in the middle and so on and so forth, and umpteen other apparatus things. But so I just sit her in the corner surrounded by cushions, so if she did fall, she'd have a soft landing. And that's how that started. When she was learning how to crawl, because the sister was learning how to crawl, I used to hold her backs of her feet, so she always had something to push back to, etc., etc. When she was walking, and she was walking by the age of 16 months, etc. So, all these little things aren't actually that small. In fact, they're really important to make sure that I cannot ever be less grateful to her twin sister, who gave me that guidance all the time about where we ought to be, which meant that she basically kept up and is now swims better than I do. She's had, she's brilliant on the trampoline, which is scary to watch.
I know that one. I watch my kids and think,
it's awful.
How have we not been to A&E with this?
It's just horrific to watch, but she goes so high. Anyway, so there's, there are all these opportunities that might not have been available to her. And obviously then there's the physical side of things with gymnastics or with any type of sport. Is the fact that there is I can't remember what it's called, but it's a neck problem with the top bone of the spine connecting to the head that is very, very delicate in young people, children, etc. with Down syndrome. So you have to go through x-rays and so on and so forth to make sure that they can do the. And, the doctors say, well, she shouldn't be doing that. And I said, well, why not? And we've looked and we've checked and so on and so forth. So there are barriers that you hadn't even thought about, but there are also really places that want to encourage this, and I've been met with very supportive people who I don't normally tell them that my daughter has got Down syndrome before I arrive. And therefore that puts them in a place of, well, you'll have to accept her. if you like, because otherwise you're being, discriminatory.
Yeah,
And things like that are really, and because it's so obvious, as to that, because Down syndrome has the obvious features of Down syndrome. And the negative side of that, unfortunately, is that some people think that she's somebody else. Imagine, if you can, that complete strangers come up to you and go, "Oh, hi," whatever name they want to give her. "Oh, you've done really well in this, and you've done really, I saw your this is recently, I saw your article in the local newspaper about all the running and everything. It's not my daughter." And it's really difficult to try and, because people are being friendly, but on the one hand, on the other hand, it's not, that's my daughter. And she's looking at them thinking, "Who are you? What are you talking about?" Like, crazy lady.
It's hard, isn't it? Because you kind of don't want to dissuade people from being positive and friendly.
Yeah.
But I know who you're speaking about. So for those who don't, there's a remarkable young lady in Devon who is very active and does a lot to raise money for things like the Down Syndrome Association and all sorts of things. And so she does it. She's big on Instagram, and I'll put links in the description. You can check her out. She's fabulous. I've been trying to get her on for an interview with the Grumpy Gits, but I haven't heard back.
The problem is that it's upsetting for her, because she goes, "I don't know who that was," and she comes away with that, whatever attitude, thankfully. But if you put them next to each other, they do not look at all alike.
No.
And just because they have these features, there are so many variations and so many. My daughter hasn't got blonde hair. There are lots of people with blonde hair who have Down syndrome. My daughter isn't Chinese. There are lots of people who are Chinese who have Down syndrome. My daughter doesn't have black hair. There are lots of people who have black hair, etc., etc. So, if you're picking up on a feature, then you're not getting to know the person. And therefore, it is good that you can come up and be friendly, but the difference is that you need to wait until they make that back approach. So, for example, if you go up to somebody who's got Down syndrome and you say hi, and if they answer you with a hi, then that's okay. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. They just blunder in, sort of thing, and think that it's for themselves. They feel that they're being good, and a lot of people are. But it's more the case that you need to step back then, once you've done a hello, and recognize that this might not be the person that you think you're talking to. I've done it. I've seen somebody in the distance and thought they were somebody else, nothing to do with any disability, just because they look like somebody else. And then I've gone, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were my friend who does this," or whatever. I've done it loads of times, especially when I was younger and I didn't used to wear my glasses when I used to go out. It's not that it's a bad thing. It's just a case of you've done the good thing, which is hi, maybe in some cases, like I feel you're fine with autism. Is there anything you want me to do? If, for example, your young person, child, etc., is having a meltdown in a public place and you're looking stressed or harassed, then that's a nice thing to do. Just, "Hello, can I help you?"
That's the best thing. That, or just walk by. It's the looky loser.
Because the person who you are saying that to will probably, they might just break down, but they might just say yes or no or whatever. But they are relieved that somebody recognizes the fact that they need help.
There's those handful of times where, and I remember one in particular where I think it was a soft play we were at. My daughter had a bit of a meltdown in the soft play, and I was on my way out, and a lady walked up and just said, "I just want to let you know you're doing a brilliant job. I watched how you dealt with all that, and it was wonderful." And you kind of walk out with you feel
a spring in your step, and life is good. I'm doing the right thing, because we need, as much, we don't think that we've got it right all the time. And absolutely. And when somebody turns around to me and says, "Oh, your daughter's so pretty," and I go, "Oh no, I haven't done anything. I haven't done anything to sort of, prompt it. But she's beautiful, and it's lovely that people recognise that. And it's any compliment is, well, you'll take it, won't you? Any compliment about your children, you'll always take it, because obviously you are proud of your children. And
Absolutely.
you can't help the fact, and it's not their choice to have been given a disability of any description. I mean, this is the thing. And I think the worst thing that I find is that nobody seems to realize, or nobody seems to understand, that any one of us could be involved with a young child, or there's some, it's not just it's friends.
I'll tell you, we back in a few years back, as my daughter, we were starting to learn about my daughter's autism and how she operates, and my wife had joined a Scope local group with obviously other SEND parents who were looking to support each other. And one of the ladies there had this wonderful son who had Down syndrome. He was non-verbal. He was very, very obviously had Down syndrome and all that kind of stuff. But there was one point where we had a birthday party for my daughter, and he was invited. And I actually had parents, one particular set of parents, come up and say, "Well, why is he here?" I was, "Well, he's one of my daughter's friends." "Well, we should have let us know. We needed to be prepared for that kind of thing." It's like, why? Why on earth would you need to be prepared for that? He's just a human being enjoying a party like the rest of the kids. Why does that need to, just because you find it uncomfortable that he may look a little different and behave a little differently, why is that something that we have to then send out like a trigger warning for a birthday party? That's ridiculous.
It is, and that is exactly why I never used to. I didn't used to say that, that because there's no point. This is what she can do. I know what she can do, and I know she'll enjoy whatever it was that I was sort of expecting her to enjoy. But what you're saying about it's amazing, and this is the bit that I used to run a group for children with special, all special needs, and there were quite a few autistic children that came, and this one family had come literally about 20-30 miles, because it was the only facility that they had in Staffordshire, but outside of our local area, and they came regularly, and they had two children, a boy and a girl, and the boy was severely autistic, and he never communicated, and he just screamed and yelled and hit them and bit them and so on and so forth. And the girl was a little bit better, in as much as she did have verbal communication. And there are so many kind people in the world. When somebody read about, I'd advertised it in the newspaper, and they ran a therapy sort of room, a therapy. They used to have massages and facials and this sort of thing. And they also used to have Reiki and, and so they offered to come and for free to come to our group once a week and for an hour and give Reiki to anybody who wanted it, whether it was the parents or whether it was the children, whichever it was. I obviously, bit their arm off, and they used to come. Anyway, they were lovely people. And this young lad that I've just described to you, it was his turn to have a session, because they were really popular with the children. But this was his first time, and he went in and he had Reiki. And those that don't know anything about Reiki, it's hands off. You don't touch. It's not a touching thing. It's just by it's basically pinpoints in your body, and you don't touch those, which is ideal for people who have got autism because it's non-sensory, etc. Yeah. So anyway, he went in. It was his turn. He went in. He came out, and I'd spoken to him before, and he didn't respond. But I came on. I said, "Oh, did you like that?" And he said, "Yes, it was the best thing that I've ever." Well, I tell you, I nearly fainted. I didn't realise that he was so vocalised, because he had never shown that before. And then I said to him, do you think it would be a good idea if you got Mummy and Daddy to learn how to do the Reiki, and you could have, that'd be great. And it was like it transported something. And I was just so thrilled. And I looked at his father, who was near to tears. And these things are just what make it all worthwhile, really. I think
that's it. I think when you enter this world of SEND and disability, you see the worst of people in many situations. Yeah. Certainly the worst of society and government and all that kind of stuff, and the bureaucracy, all the crap that goes with it. But the flip side of that, the double-edged sword, if you like, the other side of the coin is you see the best of humanity as well. Yes. You see often, and it's inspiring, and it's an unsung thing. These aren't the people that are there, these aren't the people who are, Paralympians and stuff like that. These are everyday people just doing everyday things. But you get those random, like you're saying, these people just volunteered, these random acts of kindness and thoughtfulness that makes such a difference. And that's going for a biblical, the yeast, the only small amount of yeast works its way through the whole.
Absolutely.
And those little acts of kindness and thoughtfulness work their way through society. And when you see the best of people, and it's something I've always believed. Actually, funny enough, on the last leg, they talked about it when they were talking about the, terrorist acts and stuff like that. But they were saying, don't focus on the terrorism. Look at the amazing things people are doing in response, and the amazing people there, and focus on that. Bring the positive out of it, in the sense that we can just get so caught up in the doom and gloom. When you take the time to step back and see that positive side of things and the wonderful things people do, it really changes your perceptions of the world. But what I want to bring it back to is, you've got this bill going through. What are going to be? Why is this so important for the community?
Okay, I think lots of reasons. First, they're identifying people who have got Down syndrome, which is as people who need to be maybe taken out of the learning disability sector, much the same as autism, because they have specific needs, and they have specific abilities and disabilities, and they need to be, if the provision is given to them right from the start, the chances are that they will develop faster and better. The second most important thing is that we are doing it right, because young people with Down syndrome are living a lot longer. When my daughter was born, the average age was about 40. The average age now is about 60 and rising. So therefore, we are, as a society, we are doing the right thing, and we are recognising. And thankfully, long gone are the days where they're just hidden away and that was it, and nobody bothered with them, etc., because they didn't think that they had the intelligence to do anything. And so therefore, we know that we are coming along. However, there's always more to do, because unfortunately, as they're growing older, which is the success thing, and those who have parents, the provision for them, the safe provision for them to know what's going to happen to their children, that is also an increase. So hence the bill hits on all these different sort of factors. It's not just about health, which needs to be there in abundance right from the start. It's also given the right provision throughout social care and employment. It was unheard of in 20, 30 years ago that people would be employed who have got Down syndrome or learning disabilities of any description. There were very few and far between. And I remember Remploy was an organisation that employed people just specifically who had special needs. And unfortunately, when they were shut down, and they were government sponsored, but maybe the remit was wider. Maybe it was more lip service rather than an actual future. Because one of the key things that we need is to make sure, and that's one of the things within the bill, is to meet the longevity. So we're not talking about making sure that parents are given the right information right from the start. We're not talking about the teachers are given the right bit of information right at the start when they first join school and continue to do so. We're not talking about the social workers having information and being trained to sort of like understand and work a different way. We're not talking about the employment people. We're talking about everything, all aspects that people aspire to, because in the long term, it'll be cheaper.
Yeah. And that gets missed so much. I talk about this a lot myself, in that sense that, the preparations we do now. So looking at autism specifically from obviously my personal experience, you get this thing where if the support's in place now, if the diagnosis is early enough on, and it takes so long to get the diagnosis, if you get the support in place now, you're setting our kids up, you're setting people who are autistic up for a better future, who are going to be more able to deal with the world. They're going to learn the coping techniques, not at the point of changing who they are, but, my daughter's now able to access some therapies to help her with just dealing with her anxiety, not trying to take away who she is, but just coping mechanisms so that when the anxiety peaks, she has a way to deal with it. you're going to save the system so much money because you're preventing mental health issues down the track. You're preventing potential physical issues down the track. Like you say, just having that, physiotherapy and exercise in place for your daughter must make, you said it made all the difference for how she's
absolutely
being developed as she goes on.
And it's not just the physical, there's not just her physicality. It's also the fact that she's met loads and loads and loads of people who have just accepted her for who she is. She's not a person with Down syndrome. She's like SJ, or she's like, somebody that they know. And even more so is, oh my God, look at what she can do on the trampoline, and look at what she can do. And oh, did she put, etc., etc. And that's the important part. I mean, that is as important is the acceptance. And the other the sad thing for me is that 30 years ago, or not quite 30 years ago, but decades ago, when my daughter started school, we were all positive about the fact that, that her leading the gate open for lots of other people who have got disabilities, etc. And 30 years later, we're still back in that boat where people are still talking about inclusion. We shouldn't be still talking about inclusion. It should be a matter of course.
I tell you, and it's something that has been a bit of a theme for a lot of stuff I've been involved with lately, and we talk about it on the Grumpy Gits a lot. And it's that ableism is always the last ism to be dealt with. And partly the reason for that is that racism, sexism, genderism, homophobia, all those things, it takes a shift, but it's not a financial shift.
Exactly.
When it comes to disability, it actually takes more than just changing the way you talk, changing the way that you relate to people. You're actually you're going to have to make physical changes to the world to adapt. And that's why it always gets left last on the list. And we've got a society that claims to be so diverse, claims to be so, and in many ways it is, with a lot of work to go. And I think that's important to note. It's always a work in progress. But I hate that ableism is always the last ism to be dealt with, just simply because it gets lumped in the too hard basket.
You're right. Money is and has always been the key. They're the quietest voice. County councils, local authorities, social workers, etc., sort of take money away. I don't mean intentionally, but because they're strapped, take money away because our young people haven't got their own voice. The only voice they have is our voice. And if you're caring for somebody who has any disability, I mean, the range is huge, but if you're caring for somebody, anything that comes through and you have to fight for, which I've been doing for the past 30 years, has an effect on them as well, because they see your young person, your child, and they must feel guilty. Mum or dad is upset because they're on the phone again, they've had to write another letter, they've had to do this, they've had to go to the MP, they've visited the MP, they've gone to this group to find and it's so unnecessary. It's just not right, and it's unfair, because you have two choices. You either fight or flight, and that's it. You haven't got anything else. There isn't anything in between. No. And then obviously then you get to the point where some people are just absolutely worn out, and who can blame them?
It's mentally exhausting. It's emotionally exhausting.
All of it. And why do we have to constantly feel and prove that our young people need the best? They're not going to go. They didn't ask to have this disability. They didn't ask for it. It's happened. And so if you look, every time you look at where they're going to save some money, let's go to the people who can't fight back. And it just isn't right. But I mean, that's why this bill is so important, to hopefully for future generations. And I am really positive about future generations, because some of the Facebook pages that I've got, like Positive About Downs, is just amazing. This policy group now that's come out, I used to be with, and I used to have, as I say, because of what I did, I used to arrange with another organisation who was more based on evidence and educational evidence, and I went to them. I recall when when the telephone call came through from the then person who was in charge of the provision. I'm not going to say his name, but said that yes, they had got the money to. I just burst into tears, and I was really fortunate to meet him. And when I met him in act, because of what I did in real life, and I said, "You've got no idea how important your telephone call was to me." And he was so embarrassed, bless him, because he just didn't. He just didn't. He thought, well, I just did what, etc. But like we've just said, the good news that people don't get thanked for the good news, like the lady who does the Reiki, like the man who gave me the opportunity, like Dr. Liam Fox, who's introduced this bill because of his own personal circumstances with regard to who he knows. There's a next door neighbour and he knows the son, and so on and so forth, and other people, other MPs who are part of this parliamentary group, who also have close connections with people who have got Down syndrome, and they can see the potential, and they can see, and they're frustrated as much as we are, and that's why the bill is coming into play. And I'm really pleased that they've set it out in a way that it's not one organisation. It's not just the health authority. It's not just the NHS. It's not just employers. And we are constantly told, especially in Devon at the moment, we've got this work programme to go and they can get jobs. Well, show me the people that want to employ my daughter. Show me them. Have they had the correct training? Have they got a knowledge as to what might happen? Have they got an idea? And not just for her, for your daughter. Do they know about autism? You need to be wary of the fact that, this child may not be able to understand the danger that they're about to put themselves in. It's not just for a lark. It's because there is serious danger involved here. And all these, and the more people that there are out there that can do what you and I can probably do, and very, lots of friends that I know, the better it is. And that's why integration 20, 30 years ago, if that had been in place, we might be, in my view, what we've done is we've gone sort of like 3 steps forward and about 2 steps back. And it's awful having to keep on. But this bill may, hopefully, it will bring about that change faster, that our children aren't forgotten.
For the parents who are watching this and the carers that are watching this and people watching who are seeking that support, especially, I guess, those who have friends, relatives, or family members with Down syndrome, where do you recommend they go to get support?
One of the things I think is I've just recently been enrolled as a carer ambassador for Devon carers, as you are, and I think that's a good place to start, because you if it's you or if it's somebody that whether you, regardless of how old you are, whatever the disability is, if you are a carer, you have to remain healthy, both physically and also mentally. And we, as in carers, know full well how hard that is at times. So I would always start off with an organisation that will first of all support you in supporting yourself, to give you the headspace to enable you then to sit down and think about what you need to do. There's loads of organisations. I mean, the Down Syndrome Association is one of the longest running ones. They were there when I had over 30 years ago. They've been going for a long, long time. There's, as I've just said, Positive About Down's syndrome, which is another younger, mainly it looks like that there's younger children involved in that. So if you're having a new baby, go to them as well. If you go on Facebook and put in Down syndrome, you will find a wealth of information. If you haven't got if you're not able to use the sort of Facebook, or if you're not able to you haven't got a laptop or whatever, go to your local library. They rent out for free. You can have at least half an hour to an hour. I can't remember if it's half an hour or an hour, but you can have access to a laptop. And there are librarians love books, and that doesn't mean to say that they just sit and they don't. I mean, their job is to know about every single book that they've got in that library. So go and get information, but also get information from the societies that I've just mentioned. Also go and do your own research. If you read something and it says whatever it says, that and it's not your view, it doesn't coincide with your view, or you don't feel comfortable with that view, find something else. Carry on until you find the thing that actually is how you want your child to be brought up, and go for it. And then what that will lead you into is that'll lead you into groups where there'll be like-minded people who think the same way that you do, who want to do the same things. I mean, you know, the groups that I've just talked about now, they didn't start on their own. They started as a group, and then they built and built. And then because it's like-minded people, and consequently, you won't feel alone. You won't feel lonely. You won't feel as if you're the only person that's battling. You'll be able to sort of like share that information with somebody else who is in exactly the same position as you. And that's the only way that we can change, is to get bigger and stronger and seek advice, get help, get support. Don't be afraid. You're not on your own.
We will put links to Devon Carers and also Carers UK in the description.
Yes.
So you're looking to get involved with that and get support. As Ildi said, I personally am a Devon Carers care ambassador, as she is, and I do that because they were such an amazing support to me and were really able to help me through some very tricky times in the whole process of working through my daughter's issues and needs. Ildi, I want to thank you so much for joining me. It's been so educational. I've learned so much, and your passion is amazing. I really want to thank you.
Thank you for having me. I hope it helps one person, and that's all. And that will do me.
Fantastic. We'd love to hear about it. If you have any questions, pop them in the comments, and we will endeavour to respond. And I will get any questions that are relevant over to Ildi so that she can respond well. And obviously, if you've got any experiences you'd like to share with us, put them in the comments. Hit like, hit subscribe, ring the bell. You'll always know when we've got new content coming up. You guys have a fabulous time. I'll see you again on the next episode. But in the meantime, stay safe.